She was fired for speaking Japanese on the phone, not knowing the Millionaire CEO was watching from afar. Before anything else, if you're watching this from a place of struggle, know that you're not alone. Drop a heart below. The fluorescent. Lights hummed overhead as Emma Chen hunched over her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard in the cramped IT department of Transcorp Industries. At 28, she had mastered the art of invisible efficiency, fixing problems before anyone noticed they existed, staying late without complaint, never making waves. Today felt different, though. The weight of unpaid bills sat heavy in her purse, and Noah's daycare had called twice about his persistent cough. Her phone buzzed. The international number made her heart skip. Grandma Akiko, calling from Osaka. Moshi Moshi, Emma whispered, ducking into the supply closet. Her grandmother's frail voice carried across the Pacific, each word in rapid Japanese painting a picture Emma dreaded. The cancer had spread. The treatments weren't working. Time was running short. I understand, Grandma. I'll find a way to visit. Soon, Emma promised in Japanese, tears threatening to spill as she calculated impossible numbers. Plane tickets, time off, Noah's care. Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing? Emma spun around to find Diane Mercer, her supervisor, standing in the doorway with arms crossed and lips pursed in disapproval. Behind her thick glasses, Diane's eyes held the cold satisfaction of someone who'd found exactly what she was looking for. I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. It was an emergency call from my grandmother in Japan. Speaking in foreign code during work hours? Diane's voice rose, carrying across the office. We have a strict English-only policy here at Transcorp. I thought everyone understood that. Emma's blood ran cold. English-only policy? I've never heard of any such. Don't play dumb with me. Chen, pack your desk, you're terminated, effective immediately. The words hit like physical blows. Emma stared at Diane's triumphant expression, her mind struggling to process what was happening. But my grandmother is dying. It was one phone call. 15 minutes, security will escort you out. Diane turned on her heel, leaving Emma alone with the supply closet walls closing in around her. 50 floors above, William Hayes stood at the window of the executive conference room, watching raindrops race down the glass. At 35, he'd learned to read the subtle signs of corporate toxicity. And lately, something rotten was festering in the company he'd recently acquired. The numbers looked good, but the energy felt wrong. His attention drifted to the commotion below. A young woman with a cardboard box was arguing with a security guard, her dark hair whipping in the wind as rain began to fall. Even from this distance, her distress was unmistakable. William's jaw tightened as he watched the scene unfold, a familiar anger building in his chest, the same righteous fury that had driven him to build an empire on principles his immigrant parents had died believing. And he reached for his coat. Some injustices demanded immediate action. The autumn rain fell like judgment from Seattle's gray sky, each drop soaking through Emma's thin jacket as she clutched the cardboard box containing 3 years of her professional life. Her laptop bag hung heavy on her shoulder, the weight of unpaid bills and Noah's medical forms pulling her down toward the unforgiving pavement. She pressed herself against the concrete pillar outside Transcorp's gleaming tower, watching employees hurry past, with expensive umbrellas and designer coats. None of them looked her way. In 15 minutes she'd become invisible, just another casualty of corporate efficiency. Her phone buzzed. Sunset Daycare. Noah's fever had spiked to 101.2. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised, though the bus ride would take 45 in this weather. Her voice cracked as she added, He's all I have. Ma'am, are you all right? Emma looked up to find a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit holding a large black umbrella over her head. Tall and lean with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he possessed the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems. His dark hair was damp from the rain, suggesting he'd hurried outside without protection for himself. I'm fine, she lied, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Just having the worst day of my life. He stepped closer, extending the umbrella fully over both of them. I'm Will. and I couldn't help noticing you looked like you could use some shelter from more than just the storm." Something in his gentle tone broke through Emma's defenses. The whole humiliating story poured out. The discriminatory firing, her sick grandmother Noah waiting with a fever, the rent she couldn't pay. She expected him to make polite excuses and disappear like everyone else. Instead, Will listened with the intensity of someone who understood that life could shatter in an instant. "I own a small bookstore about 10 minutes from here," he said, quietly. "There's an apartment upstairs that's been sitting empty. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe, and honestly, I could use help managing the store." Emma stared at him through the rain. "Why would you help a complete stranger?" Will's expression darkened briefly, as if remembering something painful. "Because sometimes we all need someone to believe in second chances. And because I have a feeling you're exactly the kind of person this world needs more of." Thunder rumbled overhead as Emma weighed her options. Trust a stranger or sleep in her car with a sick toddler. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Just for tonight," she whispered. Of course, Will smiled, but something in his eyes suggested he hoped it might be longer. "Let's get you and your son somewhere warm." As they walked toward his car, neither noticed the figure watching from the 52nd floor, nor the phone call that followed, a conversation that would change everything. Will's a silver BMW pulled up to Sunset Daycare just as the afternoon sky darkened to charcoal. Emma's hands trembled as she unbuckled her seatbelt, the reality of accepting help from a stranger hitting her with delayed shock. "I can wait here," Will offered, sensing her hesitation. "No, come with me. Noah needs to see who's helping us." Emma's voice carried the fierce protectiveness of a mother who'd learned to trust her instincts above all else. Inside, 2-year-old Noah sat listlessly in Miss Patricia's arms, his usually bright eyes dulled by fever. The moment he saw Emma, his little arms reached out with desperate need. "Mama," he whispered, his forehead burning against her neck. Will watched silently as Emma transformed from defeated job seeker to devoted mother, efficiently gathering Noah's things while murmuring comfort in both English and Japanese. The tenderness in her voice as she promised her son that everything would be okay struck something deep in Will's chest, a longing he'd buried beneath years of corporate success. 20 minutes later, they stood before Pages and Stories, a narrow, brick building wedged between a coffee shop and vintage clothing store. The wooden sign hanging above the entrance bore hand-painted letters that spoke of care and permanence. Through rain-streaked windows, Emma glimpsed warm lighting and shelves that reached toward a tin ceiling. "It's not much from the outside," Will said, fishing for keys. "But I think you'll find it has character." The moment they stepped inside, Emma understood. The bookstore embraced them with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. Comfortable, reading chairs nestled near tall windows, and a small section clearly designated for children featured colorful rugs and low shelves filled with picture books. Everything spoke of thoughtful curation rather than commercial efficiency. "The apartment's upstairs," Will explained, leading them past a narrow staircase. "I've been using it as an office occasionally, but it's fully furnished." Emma followed him up the creaking steps, Noah heavy in her arms. The apartment door opened to reveal a space that felt like a sanctuary. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath soft lighting. A compact kitchen sparkled with cleanliness, and the bedroom held a double bed with crisp white linens. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking the street below. "There's a crib in the closet," Will mentioned casually, left over from the previous tenant. Emma set Noah down on the plush sofa, watching as he immediately curled up against the soft cushions. The apartment felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years, a realization that both comforted and terrified her. "This is too much," she began, but Will raised a gentle hand. "You need somewhere safe for your son tonight. The store needs someone who understands people deserve to be treated with dignity. Seems like perfect timing to me." As if summoned by their conversation, Noah's fever broke into a coughing fit that left him gasping. Emma knelt beside him, her expert hands checking his temperature and breathing with practiced medical precision that surprised Will. "He needs medicine and rest," she murmured, more to herself than to Will. "I should take him to urgent care, but without insurance. There's a pediatrician 3 blocks away, Dr. Sarah Martinez. Tell her I sent you. Emma looked up sharply. You seem to have solutions for everything. Why? Will's expression grew serious as he watched Noah's labored breathing. Because some battles are worth fighting and some people are worth protecting. Your son needs you strong, not broken. After Will left, Emma finally allowed herself to cry. Great shuddering sobs of relief and terror and gratitude. As Noah slept peacefully for the first time in days, she stood at those French doors watching. Rain streaked down the glass, wondering if she'd stumbled into salvation or simply delayed her inevitable fall. In the bookstore below, a light remained on long past closing time. Morning sunlight filtered through the French doors as Emma stirred to the sound of brass bells chiming below. Noah slept peacefully beside her, his fever finally broken after Dr. Martinez's visit and prescription. For the first time in months, Emma had slept through the night without nightmares about eviction notices. The melodic sounds of activity downstairs drew her curiosity. Wrapping Noah in a soft blanket, she descended the narrow staircase to find Will arranging books with practiced efficiency. He moved through the space like someone intimately familiar with every shelf and corner. Good morning, he said without looking up, somehow sensing their presence. How's our patient? Much better, thanks to your Dr. Martinez. Emma settled Noah in the children's section, where he immediately gravitated toward a colorful book about trains. You were up early. Will straightened, brushing dust from his hands. Coffee shop opens at 6, and I like to have everything ready before the morning rush. He paused, studying her face. I have a proposition for you. Emma tensed. In her experience, propositions from men usually came with strings attached. The store owner is traveling in Europe for the next few months, Will continued, seemingly oblivious to her wariness. I've been managing things, but honestly, I'm better with numbers than customers. You have a gift for making people feel heard, something this place needs. I don't know anything about running a bookstore, but you understand what it means to be dismissed and overlooked. Half our customers come here because they're lonely, not because they need another novel. Will's voice carried conviction. I'm offering you the manager position, full-time salary, health benefits for you and Noah. Emma's pride warred with practicality. I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm a tech specialist. I need to get back to my career field. Of course, this would just be temporary, until you find the right opportunity. Throughout the day, Emma found herself observing Will with growing curiosity. He handled vendor calls with corporate authority, made financial decisions without consulting anyone, and spoke about inventory management with the fluency of someone who'd built businesses rather than simply worked in them. When a customer complained about pricing, Will adjusted it with the confidence of an owner, not an employee. That evening, after Noah fell asleep, Emma opened her laptop to search job boards. A news article caught her attention. Hayes Group acquires Transcorp Industries in $2.8 billion deal. The accompanying photo showed a man in an expensive suit shaking hands with Transcorp's board members. Emma's blood turned to ice. The man in the photograph was Will, identified as William Hayes, CEO of Hayes Group. Her fingers trembled as she read further. The acquisition had happened 3 weeks ago. William Hayes, described as a visionary leader committed to corporate transformation, had personally overseen the transition. The article praised his hands-on approach and dedication to understanding every aspect of his acquisitions. Emma stared at the screen, fragments of the past 2 days rearranging themselves into a different picture. Will hadn't stumbled upon her by chance. He'd been at Transcorp, possibly witnessing her humiliation firsthand. The perfectly timed umbrella, the convenient apartment, the helpful doctor, the job offer that solved all her immediate problems. She was either the beneficiary of extraordinary kindness or the unwitting participant in something far more complex. Outside, rain began to fall again, drumming against the windows like questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Emma stood at the bottom of the staircase clutching the printed news article, her heart hammering as Will unlocked the bookstore's front door. Noah played contentedly with wooden blocks nearby, oblivious to the storm brewing in his mother's chest. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady despite the betrayal burning through her veins. Will froze, his hand still on the deadbolt. Something in her tone made him turn slowly, and when he saw the paper in her hands, his shoulders sagged with resignation. "You lied to me." Emma held up the photograph of William Hayes, CEO. "You're not some helpful stranger who owns a bookstore. You're the man who bought the company that destroyed my life." "Emma, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been playing some sick game? That helping the pathetic fired employee makes you feel better about running a discriminatory company?" Her voice rose, years of suppressed anger finally finding a target. Will stepped toward her, hands raised in surrender. "I was there, at Transcorp. I saw what Diane Mercer did to you." Emma's breath caught. "You witnessed my humiliation and said nothing?" "I was conducting surprise visits to understand the culture at our new acquisitions. When I heard that woman fire you for speaking Japanese to your dying grandmother, I was." Will's jaw clenched. "My parents were Japanese immigrants. They built everything I have while fighting discrimination every day of their lives." The raw pain in his voice gave Emma pause, but her anger burned too hot for immediate forgiveness. "So you followed me? Orchestrated this elaborate rescue?" She gestured around the bookstore. "What was the plan, William? Make the minority employee grateful enough to stay quiet about workplace discrimination? The plan was to right an obvious wrong." Will's composure cracked. "But when I saw you protecting your son in that storm, choosing his well-being over your pride, I realized this wasn't about corporate damage control anymore." Emma studied his face, searching for deception. "Then why the lies? Why not tell me who you were?" "Because you would have seen me as the enemy, as the man responsible for what happened to you." Will ran a hand through his hair. "And maybe you would have been right. I trusted the wrong people to manage the transition." "What do you mean?" Will moved to the window, staring out at the morning traffic. "Those discriminatory policies? The English-only rule that got you fired? None of that came from me. Someone in my organization has been implementing changes I never authorized." Emma felt the first crack in her anger. "Who?" "That's what I need to find out." "And Emma." Will turned back to her, his expression desperate. "I need your help. You understand the real impact of these policies in ways I never could. Help me identify who's responsible and make this right." Emma looked down at Noah, who had abandoned his blocks and was tugging at her pajama pants. Everything in her screamed to run, to protect herself and her son from whatever corporate game was being played. But something in Will's eyes reminded her of her own desperate moments, the look of someone fighting for principles bigger than personal comfort. "If I help you," she said slowly, "I want the truth, all of it. No more convenient omissions. You have my word. And when this is over, I want my job back, not charity, a real position based on my qualifications." Will nodded solemnly. "Deal." As they shook hands, neither noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street since dawn, or the telephoto lens capturing their agreement through the bookstore window. 3 days into their uneasy alliance, Emma was rearranging the travel section when the brass bells announced an unexpected visitor. The man who entered moved with the predatory confidence of someone accustomed to owning every room he entered. Older than Will by several years, he possessed the same strong jawline, but none of the warmth. His steel gray suit probably cost more than Emma's former monthly salary. "Victor." Will's voice carried a note of warning as he emerged from behind the counter. "I wasn't expecting you." Clearly. Victor Hayes surveyed the bookstore with barely concealed disdain before his gaze settled on Emma. And who might this be? Emma felt the temperature in the room drop as Victor's pale eyes assessed her like a balance sheet, calculating value, searching for weaknesses. Behind the children's section, Noah babbled happily in his portable playpen, completely unaware of the predator studying him. "This is Emma Chen, our temporary manager," Will said carefully. "Emma, my brother Victor, COO of Hayes Group." Recognition flickered across Victor's face like lightning before clouds. Chen, as in Emma Chen, formerly of Transcorp Industries IT department. Emma's stomach lurched. Yes. Fascinating. Victor's smile held no warmth. Small world, isn't it, William? Finding your former employee playing house in our parents' old bookstore. The casual cruelty in his voice made Emma step protectively toward Noah's playpen. She caught Will's sharp intake of breath at the mention of their parents. Victor, perhaps we should discuss business privately, Will suggested, tension radiating from his rigid posture. Oh, but this is business, little brother. Victor removed his leather gloves with deliberate precision. You see, I've been fielding some interesting calls about Hayes Group's new charitable activities. Apparently, we're harboring former employees who might have legitimate grievances against our recent acquisitions. Emma felt the trap closing around them. I haven't filed any complaints. Yet. Victor's single word carried the weight of prophecy, but terminated employees have a habit of developing legal ambitions, especially when they find sympathetic ears in high places. Will stepped between Emma and his brother. That's enough, Victor. Is it? Victor circled them like a shark sensing blood. Tell me, William, what exactly do you know about Ms. Chen's termination, the circumstances? The allegations she might make? I know she was fired illegally for speaking her native language to her dying grandmother, Will replied, each word carefully controlled. Victor's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. And how would you know that? Were you perhaps conducting one of your unannounced inspection tours? The ones I specifically advised against? The brothers faced each other across the narrow aisle, years of fraternal tension crystallizing into something sharper. Emma recognized the dynamic. She'd witnessed similar power struggles in corporate boardrooms where family relationships became weaponized for business advantage. Someone needs to monitor what's happening at our acquisitions, Will said quietly. Someone does. Me. As COO, that's my responsibility, remember? The responsibility you delegated so you could focus on your next acquisition. Victor straightened, his tie. The responsibility I've been managing quite effectively. Emma's blood chilled as pieces clicked into place. Victor had been overseeing Transcorp's transition. Victor would have authorized policy changes. Victor had the power to implement discriminatory practices. Perhaps Ms. Chen should take her son upstairs while we discuss family business, Victor suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Emma gathered Noah quickly, but as she reached the staircase, Victor's voice followed her. Oh, and Ms. Chen? Seattle's employment law is quite complex. I'd be careful about making accusations without substantial proof. Defamation suits can be devastating for single mothers. Upstairs, Emma pressed her ear to the floor, straining to hear the heated conversation below. What she caught made her blood run cold. Your bleeding heart will destroy everything we've built. Policies you implemented without my knowledge. Naive fool who thinks business runs on good intentions. When silence finally fell, Emma heard Will's heavy footsteps on the stairs. His face was ashen, the family resemblance to Victor suddenly more pronounced in his exhaustion. We have a problem, he said quietly. A much bigger problem than I realized. Outside, Victor Hayes sat in his Mercedes making a phone call that would change everything. Diane, it's Victor Hayes. We need to talk about Emma Chen. And this conversation never happened. 2 days after Victor's unsettling visit, Emma sat in the bookstore's back office reviewing inventory while Noah napped upstairs. The afternoon sun slanted through dusty windows, casting long shadows across financial reports that told the story of a business built on love rather than profit margins. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email from an address she didn't recognize. Truthseeker 2024dan@protonmail.com. The subject line read, What really happened at Transcorp? Emma hesitated, her finger hovering over the mouse. Anonymous emails rarely brought good news, but something about the timing felt significant. She opened it. Ms. Chen, you deserve to know the truth about your termination. The attached documents speak for themselves. Use them wisely. A friend who believes in justice. The first attachment made Emma's breath catch. It was a company memo dated 3 weeks before her firing, bearing the official Transcorp letterhead and Victor Hayes' digital signature. The subject line read, "Cultural Integration Protocol, Immediate Implementation." Emma's hands trembled as she read the directive that had destroyed her career. Effective immediately, all verbal communication during work hours must be conducted in English only. This policy applies specifically to employees of Asian and Latino heritage who may use their native languages to exclude colleagues or share confidential information inappropriately. The clinical language couldn't disguise the document's vicious intent. This wasn't about workplace efficiency. It was targeted discrimination dressed in corporate speak. The second attachment was worse. A spreadsheet titled, "Workforce Optimization." Q3 results listed terminations from the past 6 months. Emma scanned the names, her heart sinking with each entry. Maria Gonzalez, fired for insubordination after requesting Spanish translation services for her elderly clients. David Kim, terminated for cultural insensitivity after discussing Korean business practices with international partners. Jennifer Nakamura, dismissed for policy violations after speaking Japanese during her lunch break. 23 names in total. 21 were employees of Asian or Latino heritage. Emma printed everything, her hands shaking as page after page of evidence emerged from the old laser printer. This wasn't random corporate restructuring. It was systematic ethnic cleansing, disguised as efficiency improvements. "Emma?" Will's voice carried from the storefront. "Everything all right back there?" She gathered the documents, unsure how to begin explaining what she'd discovered. Will appeared in the doorway, took one look at her expression, and immediately moved to close the office door. "What is it?" Emma handed him the printed memo. She watched his face transform as he read, confusion giving way to recognition, then hardening into something she'd never seen before, raw, primal fury that spoke of deeply personal violation. "This came from Victor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's more." Emma showed him the termination spreadsheet. Will studied the names, his breathing growing shallower with each entry. When he reached the bottom, he set the pages down with exaggerated care, as if they were made of explosives. "My parents came to this country in 1952, he said, staring at his hands. Dad was Hiroshi Hayes. He changed his name from Hiroshi Hayashi when they settled in California. Mom was Michiko. They built Hayes Group from nothing, working 16-hour days while people spat at them in the streets and called them names I won't repeat." Emma waited, sensing this was a story Will rarely shared. "They taught me that success meant lifting others up, not pushing them down. That a company's character mattered more than its quarterly profits." Will's voice cracked. "Victor knows this. History. He grew up hearing the same stories, enduring the same lessons about dignity and respect." Will stood abruptly, pacing to the small window that overlooked the alley. "He didn't just implement discriminatory policies. He betrayed everything our parents died believing in." "William?" Emma's voice was gentle but firm. "We need to take this to the authorities, the Department of Labor, the EEOC, maybe even the FBI. Will." Will turned back to her, his expression hardening with resolve. "But first, I need to understand how deep this goes. Victor didn't act alone. He couldn't have. Someone's been feeding him intelligence, helping him identify targets." Emma's laptop chimed again. Another email from the same anonymous address, this one containing a single line. "Check your apartment. Someone's been watching." Through the office window, a black sedan pulled away from the curb across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun like dead eyes. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Pages and Stories. Emma looked up from organizing the new arrivals display to see Jennifer Reed pushing through the front door, her familiar blonde bob and nervous energy unchanged from their Transcorp days. "Jennifer?" Emma set down the stack of novels, surprised by the mixture of relief and wariness flooding through her. "What are you doing here? I heard through the grapevine that you were working at this little bookstore." Jennifer's smile seemed forced as she glanced around the cozy interior. "I wanted to check on you after what happened." Emma led her to the reading area near the window, noting how Jennifer's designer purse and perfectly pressed blazer contrasted with the bookstore's worn comfort. "How did you find me? Seattle's tech community is smaller than you think. Word travels fast when someone like you just disappears." Jennifer perched on the edge of an armchair, her posture suggesting she didn't plan to stay long. "I was worried about you and Noah." They spent several minutes catching up. Jennifer had been promoted to senior analyst after the recent restructuring. Several mutual colleagues had also been let go, and the office atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Emma found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of workplace gossip, almost forgetting the upheaval of recent days. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way." Jennifer's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Are you sure you can trust this William Hayes?" Emma stiffened. "What do you mean? Think about it logically. You get fired from his company, and within hours this mysterious stranger appears with the perfect solution to all your problems?" Jennifer leaned forward conspiratorially. "There are rumors circulating that the Hayes brothers are working together on some kind of damage control strategy. That's ridiculous. William and Victor clearly don't get along, or that's exactly what they want people to think." Jennifer's interruption was gentle, but insistent. "Emma, you're brilliant, but you've always been too trusting. What if this whole rescue scenario is just elaborate public relations? Help the wrongfully terminated minority employee, create a feel-good story to counteract any discrimination lawsuits?" Emma felt the familiar doubt creeping back into her chest. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I brought something you should see." Jennifer reached into her purse and withdrew a manila folder. "A friend in HR slipped me these before I left Transcorp yesterday." The documents Jennifer spread across the coffee table made Emma's blood run cold. Policy memos, termination authorizations, and cultural integration directives, all bearing what appeared to be William Hayes' signature alongside Victor's. "Look at the dates," Jennifer pointed with a manicured finger. "These go back months before the acquisition was officially completed. Both brothers were involved in planning these changes from the beginning." Emma stared at William's signature on a memo titled, "Streamlining Cultural Diversity, Phase 1 Implementation." The handwriting looked authentic, the digital signature, matching ones she'd seen on legitimate business documents around the bookstore. "Jennifer, where exactly did your friend get these? Does it matter?" "The evidence speaks for itself." Jennifer gathered the documents back into the folder and placed it on the table between them. "I'm leaving this with you because I care about you and Noah. But Emma, be careful who you trust. Sometimes the people who seem like saviors are just playing a longer game." After Jennifer left, Emma sat alone with the folder, her mind spinning. Upstairs, Noah's laughter echoed from his afternoon play session, a sound of innocence that made her chest tighten with protective fear. When Will returned from his vendor meetings, he found Emma sitting in the office, the controversial documents spread before her like tarot cards predicting disaster. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hollow. "Right now." Chapter 9. The break-in. Emma climbed the narrow staircase to her apartment that evening with leaden feet, Will's explanations about the forged signatures still echoing in her mind. He'd seemed genuinely shocked by the documents Jennifer had provided, his forensic examination revealing subtle inconsistencies in the digital signatures that suggested sophisticated forgery. But doubt gnawed at her like a persistent ache. The apartment door stood slightly ajar. Emma's maternal instinct screamed danger as she pushed the door open with trembling fingers. The cozy sanctuary that had become their refuge was destroyed, furniture overturned, drawers emptied onto the hardwood floor, her laptop bag dumped beside the sofa with its contents scattered like digital entrails. On the coffee table, arranged with deliberate precision, lay the manila folder containing the Transcorp documents she'd hidden beneath Noah's crib mattress. Beside it sat a single sheet of paper with words that made her blood freeze. Some secrets should stay buried. Take your son and disappear. There's $50,000 cash in the kitchen drawer. This is your only warning. Emma's hands shook as she rushed to the kitchen, yanking open drawers until she found the money. Crisp hundreds bound with bank straps, more cash than she'd ever seen in one place. The reality of the threat hit her like a physical blow. Someone had been watching, waiting, planning. She grabbed Noah's diaper bag with frantic efficiency, stuffing clothes and essentials while her mind raced through escape routes. The bus station, maybe a cheap motel across town until she could figure out what to do next. Her grandmother's voice echoed from their last phone call. Sometimes running is the only way to protect what matters most. Noah stirred in his crib. As she lifted him, his sleepy protest cutting through her panic. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, wrapping him in his favorite blanket. "Mama's going to keep you safe." Heavy footsteps on the staircase made her freeze. The front door was still open. Had her intruder returned? Emma clutched Noah closer, scanning the apartment for anything she could use as a weapon. "Emma? I saw the door." Will's voice stopped abruptly as he took in the destruction. Relief and suspicion warred in Emma's chest as he stepped carefully through the debris, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked like fear. "Did you do this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Will's expression shattered. "How can you even ask that?" "Because I don't know who to trust anymore." Emma's voice cracked as weeks of accumulated stress exploded. "Someone knew exactly where I hid those documents. Someone had keys to this apartment. Someone knows enough about my situation to know that $50,000 would be impossible to refuse." Will approached slowly, hands visible and empty, as if calming a wounded animal. "Emma, I swear on my parents' graves that I had nothing to do with this." "Then who? Who else knows about the documents? Who else has access?" "Victor." The name dropped between them like a stone into still water. "He's the only one who knew you were living here. He has master keys to all Hayes Group properties." Emma stared at the threatening note, its block letters professionally printed rather than handwritten. "Why would he go this far?" "Because we're getting close to something that could destroy him." Will's voice carried grim certainty. "Emma, I need you to tell me everything. Every conversation, every document, every person who's contacted you since this began. If we're going to survive this, I need the complete truth." Outside, a car engine started in the alley below, the same black sedan that had been watching the bookstore, now disappearing into Seattle's evening traffic with the satisfaction of a job well done. Emma stood in the destroyed apartment holding Noah, torn between fleeing into the night and demanding answers from the man who claimed to be her protector. Will's earnest expression in the lamplight looked genuine, but she'd learned that survival meant trusting actions over words. "If you want the complete truth, then start talking," she said, settling Noah back in his crib but keeping herself between him and Will. "No more convenient omissions." Will ran both hands through his hair, the gesture of a man preparing to reveal his deepest secrets. "The company is under federal investigation for systematic discrimination. Has been for 3 months. Emma's breath caught. "What?" "The Department of Labor received multiple complaints about Transcorp before we even completed the acquisition. Anonymous tips about discriminatory hiring practices, workplace harassment, suspicious termination patterns." Will moved to the window, checking the street below before continuing. "When I took control, I found evidence of policy changes that violated federal employment law." "And you said nothing?" "I thought Victor was handling the cleanup," he assured me. "The problematic policies were being reversed, that we were cooperating fully with investigators." Will's voice carried the weight of betrayed trust. "I was focused on 2 other acquisitions, trusting my brother to manage the day-to-day operations." Emma studied his profile against the window. But Victor was making things worse. Not just worse. Calculated. Systematic. He created policies specifically designed to drive out protected classes while maintaining plausible deniability. Will turned back to her, his expression haunted. "Emma, your termination wasn't random workplace discrimination. It was a test case. The implications hit her like ice water." "A test case for what?" "To see if they could fire someone for speaking their native language and frame it as policy enforcement. If it worked with you, they'd roll out similar strategies, company-wide." Will's hands clenched into fists. "You were chosen because you were competent, well-liked, and had no obvious legal resources." The perfect victim. Emma sank onto the couch, the pieces finally forming a complete picture. That's why you helped me. Guilt over being part of a system that targeted me specifically. It started that way, Will admitted. But Emma, watching you fight for your son while maintaining your dignity, seeing you rebuild your life from nothing. He paused, vulnerability replacing corporate authority in his voice. It stopped being about corporate responsibility weeks ago. Then what is it about? Will met her eyes directly. It's about the fact that I've spent years building companies but never building a life. About realizing that all my success means nothing if I can't protect the people who matter most. Emma felt her defenses wavering. How do I know you're telling the truth about the forged signatures? Will pulled out his phone, scrolling through email attachments. Because I hired a forensic document examiner yesterday. Look. The analysis was thorough and damning. The signatures on Jennifer's documents showed digital manipulation, layers added after initial creation, metadata inconsistencies, pixel-level alterations that proved forgery. Victor hadn't just betrayed his brother, he'd framed him with sophisticated precision. He's been planning this for months, Will continued, creating evidence that would make me the scapegoat if the federal investigation expanded. If I go down for discrimination, Victor takes control of Hayes Group with a clean reputation. Emma studied the forensic report, her technical background, helping her understand the digital evidence. This proves the documents are fake, but it doesn't prove Victor created them. No, but it proves someone with significant resources and technical expertise did. Someone with access to my legitimate signature samples and official company systems. Will's expression hardened. Someone who benefits from my destruction. Outside, the black sedan returned, parking across the street with its engine running. We need to leave, Will said urgently. Now. As Emma gathered Noah and the evidence, she realized they'd crossed a line. This wasn't about her wrongful termination anymore. It was about corporate warfare with federal implications, and they were caught in the crossfire. The Hayes Group headquarters rose 52 floors above downtown Seattle, its glass and steel facade reflecting the gray morning sky like a corporate mirror. Emma sat in Will's BMW outside the building, Noah asleep in his car seat while she tested the wireless earpiece Will had given her. Are you sure about this? She whispered into the microphone. Will's voice crackled through the earpiece from the executive elevator. I need a witness to whatever Victor says, someone the federal investigators will believe. Emma watched through the tinted windows as employees hurried past on the sidewalk below, unaware that their company's future was about to be decided in a conference room high above their heads. The wireless receiver in her lap would broadcast every word of the confrontation between brothers. Victor's here, Will's voice reported. I'm going in. Emma heard the elevator doors open, followed by footsteps on polished marble. Will had arranged the meeting under the pretense of discussing quarterly projections, but both brothers knew this was about much more than numbers. William. Victor's voice carried its usual authority. You sounded urgent on the phone. We need to discuss the Transcorp situation. The federal investigation has expanded. A pause, then Victor's laugh, cold and calculating. Has it now? And what does that have to do with me? Everything. Will's voice hardened. I know about the forged documents, Victor. The signatures, the policy memos, the systematic targeting of minority employees. Emma heard papers rustling, presumably Will spreading the forensic evidence across the conference table. Impressive work, Victor said after a moment. Though I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You implemented discriminatory policies, framed me for authorization, and created a paper trail that would destroy my reputation if the investigation intensified. Such dramatic language, little brother. Victor's voice carried amusement now. You always were prone to emotional outbursts. 23 employees, Victor. 23 people fired for speaking their native languages, practicing their cultural traditions, or simply existing while non-white in your corporate vision. The silence stretched long enough that Emma wondered if the connection had failed. Then Victor's voice returned, stripped of its earlier mockery. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I implemented those policies, yes, I targeted specific demographics, and yes, I made sure your signatures appeared on the authorization documents. Emma's breath caught. Even expecting the confession hearing, Victor's casual admission of systematic discrimination sent chills down her spine. Why? Will's voice was barely above a whisper. Because you're weak. Victor's tone turned venomous. Our parents built this company through strength and determination, not your bleeding heart liberalism. The market rewards efficiency, not diversity seminars. Our parents were immigrants, Victor. They faced the same discrimination you're perpetuating, and they overcame it by being better than their competition, not by demanding special treatment. Victor's voice rose. I optimized our workforce by removing underperformers who happen to be minorities. If that violates your precious principles, then perhaps you're not fit to lead this company. Emma heard Will's sharp intake of breath. You're talking about people's lives, families destroyed because of your prejudice. I'm talking about quarterly profits and shareholder value. Emma Chen was an adequate IT technician who cost us thousands in productivity every time she took personal calls in Japanese. Removing her improved efficiency. You destroyed her life to save money on phone bills? I removed a distraction and sent a message to other employees about professional standards. Victor's voice carried the satisfaction of a predator describing a successful hunt. Though I admit, I didn't anticipate your white knight complex. Confrontation was escalating beyond Emma's worst fears. She heard chairs scraping as if one of the brothers had stood. You're finished, Victor. I'm taking this evidence to the federal investigators myself. Victor's laugh was pure poison. Are you? Because I've already presented the board with evidence of your gross negligence and emotional instability. Your little romance with that fired employee has compromised your judgment beyond repair. The board will see the forensic evidence. The board will see what I show them. And what I've shown them is a CEO who authorized discriminatory policies, then tried to cover them up by manipulating a victim. Victor's voice turned triumphant. Congratulations, William, you've just confessed to everything. The line went dead. The Hayes Group boardroom buzzed with tension as Emma sat in the observation gallery, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms, while corporate warfare unfolded below. Will had requested an emergency board meeting to expose Victor's discrimination scheme, but something felt wrong. The board members' expressions were too knowing, too prepared. Victor stood at the head of the polished table, his presentation already loaded on the wall screen. Before we begin, I must address a serious concern about William's fitness to lead this company. Emma's stomach dropped as she realized the trap. Victor had anticipated this confrontation. Over the past month, our CEO has engaged in a romantic relationship with Emma Chen, a former Transcorp employee who was terminated for policy violations. Victor clicked to a series of photographs. Will helping Emma at the bookstore, their coffee meetings, Noah playing in the store. This relationship began immediately after her termination and has clearly compromised his judgment. Board member Margaret Walsh frowned. Victor, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that William authorized discriminatory policies at Transcorp, then manipulated Ms. Chen to prevent her from filing complaints. Victor's voice carried calculated grief. The evidence is overwhelming. The screen filled with the forged documents Jennifer had shown Emma, but now presented as legitimate proof of Will's guilt. Emma watched in horror as Victor systematically destroyed his brother's reputation with lies wrapped in corporate sophistication. Will stood, his face pale. Those documents are forgeries, are they? Victor produced a folder. These are the digital records from your executive assistant's computer, showing your authorization of every policy change, timestamps, IP addresses, administrative access, logs. Emma realized the depth of Victor's planning. He hadn't just forged signatures. He'd created an entire digital trail implicating Will. The forensic analysis proves, Will began, proves that someone hired an expensive consultant to claim forgery after the fact. Victor interrupted. Gentlemen, ladies, we have a CEO who violated federal employment law, then attempted to cover it up through emotional manipulation of his victim. Board member Richardson cleared his throat. "William, these are serious allegations." "They're lies," Will said desperately. "Victor implemented those policies without my knowledge." "Then why do our records show your computer authorizing every change?" Victor's triumph was complete. "Why did you immediately begin a relationship with Ms. Chen instead of referring her to our legal department?" The board voted quickly. Temporary suspension of William Hayes pending a full investigation, with Victor assuming interim leadership. As security escorted Will from the building, he looked up at Emma in the gallery. His expression carried defeat, but his eyes held a promise. This wasn't over. In the parking garage, Victor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Recording complete. Thank you for the confession." The hunter had become the hunted. 3. Days after Will's humiliating ejection from the boardroom, Emma received a cryptic text. "Cafe Luna, 2 p.m., come alone. We have friends." She found Will at a corner table in the small neighborhood cafe, far from downtown's corporate towers. Across from him sat an elegant Japanese-American woman in her 50s and a nervous-looking man Emma recognized from Transcorp's finance department. "Emma, meet Melissa Tanaka," Will said as she approached. "She was my mother's best friend and one of Seattle's top employment discrimination attorneys." Melissa's handshake conveyed both warmth and steel. "Your mother would be proud of what you're doing, William." The nervous man shifted uncomfortably. "I'm Marcus Chen. I sent you those documents." Emma's eyes widened. "You're the anonymous tipster?" "CFO at Transcorp for 8 years. I've been documenting Victor's policies since the acquisition." Marcus pulled out a tablet. "I have everything. Internal emails, financial records showing budget allocations for workforce optimization, even recordings of Victor's strategy meetings." Melissa leaned forward. "Marcus approached me yesterday. What Victor did violates multiple federal statutes, but we need more than documentation. We need victims willing to testify." "I've been contacting the terminated employees," Emma said. 17 have agreed to participate in a class action lawsuit. Will's expression shifted from defeat to determined hope. "What do you need from me?" "Your testimony about Victor's confession. The recording Emma made proves intent, but we need your first-hand account of the conspiracy." Melissa's voice carried courtroom authority. "Are you prepared to testify against your own brother?" Will stared into his coffee, years of family loyalty warring with moral obligation. "Victor betrayed everything our parents built. He used their legacy to destroy innocent people's lives." "That's not the only thing he did," Marcus interjected, pulling up financial records on his tablet. "Victor's been embezzling acquisition funds. The discrimination was designed to hide systematic financial fraud." Emma felt the pieces clicking into place. The terminations reduced payroll costs while Victor skimmed the savings into offshore accounts. "Exactly. We're not just talking about employment discrimination. This is corporate fraud on a massive scale." Melissa gathered her papers. "Victor Hayes isn't just a bigot. He's a criminal." Will looked up, resolve hardening his features. "What do we do?" "We go to war," Melissa replied. "Legally, publicly, and completely. By the time we're finished, Victor won't just lose Hayes Group. He'll lose his freedom." Outside the cafe window, a familiar black sedan sat running, its occupant making urgent phone calls. The final battle was about to begin. 3 months later, the Seattle Times headline read, "Hayes Group heir sentenced in discrimination scandal." Emma folded the newspaper as she walked through the gleaming corridors of Transcorp Industries, now bearing new signage that read, "Transcorp, a Hayes Group company. Excellence through inclusion." The federal investigation had moved with surprising speed once Melissa Tanaka presented the mountain of evidence. Victor's carefully constructed empire of lies crumbled within weeks when faced with Marcus Chen's financial records, the recorded confession, and testimony from 23 wrongfully terminated employees. The embezzlement charges alone carried a 15-year sentence. Emma paused outside her new office door, still marveling at the nameplate. Emma Chen, Director of Technology and Inclusion. Through the glass wall, she could see her team, a diverse group of programmers, analysts, and project managers working on software designed to identify and prevent discriminatory practices in corporate systems. Admiring your kingdom? Will's voice carried gentle humor as he approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that had taken months to return to his face. Hardly a kingdom. More like a really expensive computer lab with good intentions. Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. How was the board meeting? Productive. The diversity initiatives are showing measurable results. Employee satisfaction up 30%, productivity up 15%, and legal complaints down to 0. Will leaned against her doorframe. Turns out treating people with dignity is actually good for business. Emma studied his face, noting how the strained lines around his eyes had softened. The past 3 months had been brutal. Federal depositions, media scrutiny, and the painful process of rebuilding Hayes Group's reputation from scratch. But something good had emerged from the wreckage. How are you handling everything with Victor? She asked gently. Will's expression darkened briefly. He made his choices. I just have to live with the fact that I trusted the wrong person for too long. He straightened, shaking off the melancholy. But enough about the past. I wanted to discuss the community center project. Emma's pulse quickened. Will had been hinting at something big for weeks, a project that would transform the bookstore where their relationship began. Pages and Stories is officially becoming the Hayes Community Cultural Center, Will announced, his enthusiasm infectious. Full programming for immigrant families, small business resources, legal aid clinics, and a child care center so parents can attend evening classes. Will, that's incredible, but the cost is exactly what this community needs. Mom and Dad always said success meant lifting others up. Will's voice carried conviction that reminded Emma why she'd fallen for him in the first place. Besides, Noah's going to need other kids to play with. The casual reference to their future together made Emma's heart skip. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully through shared adversity and mutual respect. Trust rebuilt from honesty, affection growing from partnership. Speaking of Noah, Emma glanced at her watch. I need to pick him up from daycare. Want to come with me? Always. Will's simple answer carried weight beyond its words. As they walked toward the parking garage, Emma reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. A discriminatory firing had led to justice for dozens of victims. A corporate conspiracy had exposed systematic fraud. A chance encounter in the rain had grown into something that looked remarkably like love. Emma. Will stopped beside his car, suddenly serious. I need you to know something. Everything we've built, the programs, the changes at Hayes Group, this relationship, it's real. It's not gratitude or guilt or corporate responsibility. Emma stepped closer, studying his face. In the afternoon light. I know. It stopped being about the job or the lawsuit months ago. Then what is it about? Emma smiled, remembering a conversation from what felt like lifetime ago. It's about building something worth protecting, something that honors the people who believed in second chances. As they drove toward Noah's daycare, neither noticed the small crowd gathering outside the bookstore or the banner being hung across the entrance. Grand opening. Hayes Community Cultural Center. Welcome home. 1 year after a desperate phone call in Japanese changed everything, Emma stood before the transformed bookstore watching Seattle's mayor cut a ceremonial ribbon. The brass nameplate now read, Hayes Community Cultural Center, but the warm, lighting and comfortable reading chairs remained, creating a bridge between past and future. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Davidson announced to the gathered crowd, it's my honor to dedicate this space to the principles of inclusion, opportunity, and second chances that make our city great. Emma scanned the faces before her. Former Transcorp colleagues who'd found new careers, immigrant families enrolling their children in English classes, small business owners attending the entrepreneurship workshops. Noah toddled between the crowds, his confident steps matching his growing vocabulary that now included words in English, Japanese, and the Spanish he'd learned from Maria Gonzalez, who managed the center's family services. You did this, Will. whispered, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee that had become their ritual. We did this, Emma corrected, accepting the warm mug. All of us. The past year had transformed more than just the bookstore. Transcorp's inclusion initiatives had become a national model, attracting companies seeking to implement similar programs. Emma's technology solutions were being adapted across multiple industries, proving that ethical business practices could drive innovation and profit simultaneously. Emma-chan, a familiar voice called from the crowd. Emma's heart soared as she spotted her grandmother Akiko making her way through the celebration, assisted by Dr. Martinez. The experimental treatment in Japan had been successful. Grandma Akiko was not only cancer-free but strong enough to travel to Seattle for an extended visit. Grandma. Emma embraced the small woman who had taught her that dignity survived any hardship. I'm so glad you're here. I wouldn't miss seeing what my granddaughter built from her tears, Akiko replied in accented English, then switched to Japanese. Your parents would be so proud. Will approached respectfully, bowing slightly in the traditional manner. Mrs. Yamamoto, it's an honor to finally meet you. Emma speaks of you constantly. Akiko studied Will with the sharp eyes of someone who'd survived too much to be easily impressed. After a moment, she smiled. You are the one who helped my Emma when she had nothing? She helped herself, I just provided an umbrella. A good man provides shelter from storms he didn't create. Akiko nodded approvingly. You have my blessing. Emma looked between them confused, but Will was already moving toward the small stage at the front of the room. If I could have everyone's attention, Will called, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned to lead through service rather than command. Today marks not just the opening of this center, but the first anniversary of our Technology and Inclusion Division at Transcorp. Applause filled the room as Emma was gently guided toward the stage, Noah somehow appearing in her arms, as if drawn by magnetic force. A year ago, Emma Chen was fired for speaking Japanese to her dying grandmother. Will continued, his voice steady despite the emotion underlying each word. That act of discrimination became the catalyst for transformation, not just of a company, but of an entire approach to business ethics. Emma felt tears threatening as Will's words painted the journey they'd shared. The investigation that brought justice to 23 wrongfully terminated employees, the corporate restructuring that eliminated discriminatory practices, the community programs that had touched hundreds of lives. But tonight isn't about corporate success or legal victories, Will said, his eyes finding Emma's. It's about family. The family we're born into, the family we choose, and the family we build from love, respect, and shared values. Will stepped closer, reaching into his jacket pocket. Emma, you taught me that true leadership means lifting others up, that real success is measured in lives improved rather than profits maximized. The room fell silent as Will dropped to one knee, producing a simple platinum ring that caught the warm light like a promise. This bookstore belonged to my parents, immigrants who believed America's strength came from its diversity. They would have loved you and Noah, just as I do. Will's voice cracked slightly. Will you marry me? Will you help me build a legacy they would be proud of? Through her tears, Emma saw the faces surrounding them. Friends who'd become family, colleagues who'd become advocates, strangers who'd become community. This wasn't just a proposal. It was an invitation to continue building something larger than themselves. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As Will slipped the ring onto her finger, Noah clapped his hands and shouted his newest word, Papa. The room erupted in celebration, but Emma heard only Will's whispered promise. We're going to establish the Hayashi Chen Foundation for Immigrant Families. Our parents' names together, helping others find their own second chances. As they kissed, amid the cheers of their chosen family, Emma realized this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a story that would touch lives they'd never meet, in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Outside, snow began to fall on Seattle, each flake unique and beautiful, joining others to create something bigger than the sum of its parts.